Good afternoon. Welcome to this IoT webinar on security practices within IoT and the best security practices within IoT. My name is Pete Briley. I'm a sales performance manager for the EMEA region of Telenor IoT, which means I work with our sales team, both new sales, existing business, and I work with our customers across the EMEA region in loads of different verticals, loads of different kinds of solutions that we work on. And I'm joined here today by two really great colleagues of mine. I have Matthias and Jay. Matthias, I'll come to you to introduce yourself first.
Thanks, Jay. Hi, my name is Matthias Rundén, and I work as a business security officer with Telenor IoT, and I'm overall responsible for the security within Telenor IoT.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Jay?
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name's Jay Adams, and I work as a technical solution manager at Telenor IoT. And in my role, I'm responsible for the solution design, ensuring the customer solution is optimized not only from a technical perspective, but also commercial.
Thank you. And welcome to you two as well. So obviously, cybersecurity is a huge topic. It's one that's being covered in the media more and more and more. I mean, I think we all can remember Bank of Indonesia being robbed of $1 billion by the Lazarus Group. I think I certainly remember the Sony Pictures leak, the Guardians of Peace hacking group that did that. And obviously in the M&O industry in Australia, the network Optus had a big data leak a couple of years ago of 10 million customers. My parents are actually also in that data leak as well. So as the world is becoming more digital, it's also becoming a more dangerous place from a cybersecurity perspective. And I think, everyone tuning in is probably very cognizant of that. So Matthias, if I can come to you, I mean, what's at stake here?
Basically, everything is at stake. Your service availability is at stake. You can have a data breach that could cause serious damage to your reputation. You can have different types of denial of service attacks where you can have devices not responding as they should. And I mean, this affects everyone in the industry, from the biggest companies to governments to small businesses.
Yeah. And I suppose it's, we're talking about many things here. We're talking about your device is not working, or a DDoS, distributed denial of service attack, but you're also talking about accessing data and getting hold of it, leaking it, whatever.
Yeah.
It's the whole smorgasbord. I mean, I suppose, when we think about security-related questions, Jay, you're obviously involved a lot in the architectural design of the solution design, if you like. I mean, how often are you in that role getting asked security-related questions?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. So obviously, as you know, we have customers across multiple verticals. So these can range from smart cities, smart health, automotive, also critical business transactions, to name just a few. So we're frequently getting asked customer security related questions.
Yeah. And I suppose as well in some really heavy requirement industries, you mentioned financial transactions there, and obviously we've done a lot of critical national infrastructure type projects as well. So it's high stakes, I think.
Exactly, yeah. And some of the common themes that we often get asked are kind of, is Telenor IoT 27001 certified? Can you support private APNs, VPNs, or lease lines? We also get asked if we can actually restrict communication between different terminals, and also things such as automation and triggers. Can you actually, obviously for fraud detection? So these are kind of the common questions that we often get asked, as well as customized routines and reports for individual specific customer requirements.
I bet. And a load to unpack there, which I think we will also go on to a little bit later. So we'll go into those one by one. But I mean, I guess, Matthias, if I start with you, and I think we've got a slide to share as well. But I mean, from your perspective, and for anyone watching this, what are the key considerations for protecting against attacks?
Yeah, there's a lot of things you can do to protect and mitigate the consequences. It might be difficult to avoid being attacked, but
sure,
there is a lot of things to do. You can potentially consider physical security. What happens if someone gets hold of your device or your SIM card? Can they then get access to your application? Can they get inside the application using that way? So think about to protect your device from theft and also the SIM card. And you can use features such as device lock. I know you will talk about that later on, Jay.
Exactly, yeah.
And while talking about this, consider physical hardening of your device. Remove ports that you don't use, disable functions that you don't need to have.
So if you have like an Ethernet port or something and it's a cellularly connected device, get rid of the port. Just don't even have it accessible.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And also consider to use MFF2 SIM cards to
soldered on
the hardware. Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes called an eSIM. Colloquially.
Yeah. And also device management. It's very crucial. You need to have your device up to date all the time. So. And the way to have that is to apply patches all the time. So you need to have some kind of OTA support where you can download new patches over the air.
And I suppose if for customers who are watching this, maybe they've got deployments out in the field already, how would you know if your devices need a security patch? How would you know to actually do it?
I would say that your vendor should know. Your device vendor should know and should notify you. Yeah.
So it's the person, the company that sold you the devices, they should also be keeping you up to date with security patches.
Exactly.
Supporting with the OTA requirements.
Yeah.
Got it.
Another area is data storage and transfer.
Yeah.
You need to have control of your data. Even though the mobile network and VPNs offers a lot of protection, it's good practice to ensure that you have end-to-end encryption enabled so that you control your own data as a customer.
The IPsec kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. From the device to the application, all the way. Yeah.
With an encryption key. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And of course, weak passwords. Don't use default passwords.
Things like password for the password. Yeah.
It might sound a bit silly, but it's still in use, I'm afraid. So change them.
Yeah, because I think you mentioned to me that there have been a lot of attacks that have happened because somebody guessed a default password. Wow.
And then there is another thing that is very crucial, that's testing. So you need to do a lot of testing before you deploy your devices. And you do that internally when you develop your service. And you should also consider to have some external party to perform pen testing on your behalf.
Penetration testing.
Exactly, trying to break your security and then letting you know what you need to do.
So these are security experts, companies that you effectively pay to break into the systems, break into the house.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, then once you have deployed your service and your device, you need to have some kind of continuous monitoring
to be able to monitor and
to know what's happening. Yeah. I think you will talk more about this later.
That's
Jay.
correct.
Yeah.
And actually, Jay, if I can bring you in, I know Matthias there mentioned that the testing was a big part of it, and I know that you've been involved in setting up some kind of test environments in the past for customers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think we're also going to show a slide as well, sort of just further to what Matthias was saying. So one of the things that we just wanted to sort of show or depict in this slide was just to show how the information or the data is actually sent from the customer product, which has been deployed in the field via the mobile network into the Telenor IoT platform, and then the information is either sent via the internet or via a VPN to the customer data center. But in terms of what you were asking, Pete, yeah, so absolutely. So we have something called enterprise hierarchies, which is the products. And this can essentially allow customers to actually create separate environments. So, for example, production as well as the test environment. So completely separate environments to actually perform that testing.
Right. So it's, I think, when we talked about it before, and the customer that we're thinking of is, they actually had like an exact mirror. It had the same APNs, the same price bands, same tariffs, same countries, same everything. But it was ring-fenced. It was separated.
Exactly. And then they use that for their system integration testing, user acceptance testing, completely separate from the production. They can make changes without actually having an impact on their production environment.
And I suppose you could also have like APNs and that were also testing APNs specifically, so you were totally separated from...
You can, yes. And I will talk about APNs and VPNs later on in the webinar. But one of the things we also have is a new test facility, which is actually in Karlskrona in the south of Sweden. And this is actually quite rare. It actually has 4 live networks. So we have all of the Telenor Nordic networks available in the test lab.
Oh, so Telenor Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and DNA Finland.
Correct,
live.
Yeah.
Right.
And not only do we have those live networks, we can also support all of the different access technologies, everything from 2G up to 5G NSA. So it's really, really good facility. And you can actually obviously test your devices, see how they behave before deploying in the field.
In a totally controlled environment as well, I guess, and I'm presuming here all of the cross-border simulation, that kind of thing, networks going up and down, disturbances.
Yep, we can force handovers, we can obviously attenuate signal to see how the device will behave in those different network scenarios. As Matthias mentioned, it's really important that a customer knows how the device will behave before deploying in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very interesting topic there. And I think, as we come on, I think we've got another slide coming up here around best practices for IoT security, which is one of the ones we've prepared. But Matthias, I think certainly one of the questions that we've had in advance of this, and one of the things that people have asked for is, are there any good resources for documentation in this area? Anything you can point people towards to look at for how to prepare their devices for deployment?
Actually, the GSMA has a very comprehensive guide on IoT security guidelines. It's covering basically everything you need to know.
The GSMA is the industry body for the mobile networks. So it's across all networks.
Yeah. And of course, Telenor IoT, our website.
Amazing.
Good resource.
IoT.telenor.com, I believe, is the address there.
And you can always reach out to any one of us.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So we'll put the links in our comments on the show notes for this. And of course, please reach out if anybody does want to dive deeper on those. Yeah. And obviously, we've mentioned the fact that we're part of a broader group here, the Telenor brand, obviously very prominent in the Nordics, and we've got some other home networks that we own in Asia. Is being a part of a big corporation a good thing from a security perspective? How does that kind of bleed through to us as the IoT part of the family?
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to be a part of a large group. In this case, it gives us a lot of opportunities to cooperate, share information between companies. We have different types of communities. For example, there is this BSO community where the BSOs of all different parts of the group share their experience and knowledge.
So if something comes up in, Telenor Pakistan, for example, that gets shared with you as the group of family of BSOs.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. And I suppose, when we think about how we work as a group, big corporation, different parts of the world, is there any concern for people watching? Should there be any thinking about what data we are storing or what we see?
I don't think so. There is no need for concern as we don't store any customer data.
Sure.
We just transport data from point A to point B, from the device to the application or vice versa. Yeah.
So it's what we call the metadata, I guess. The how many bytes, what network, what country.
Yeah, that of course needs to be stored.
Call.
Yeah.
But it's the actual...
But the content itself, it's never stored. No.
And I know, in Jay, if I can bring you in maybe for a comment, we've had a number of RFQs, and they've asked for this kind of information, what they call a packet inspection, I believe.
Yeah, exactly, Peter. So, so from a smart city, smart metering perspective, we often get asked if there's any form of packet inspection from the Telenor side, and obviously, absolutely, there's not.
Great. And I suppose, actually, if I can bring you in further there, Jay, as a member of the TSM team, the Technical Solutions Managers, you're building these solutions. What are our customers asking for?
Yep, so as Matthias mentioned, so during the customer onboarding process, which I'm responsible for, we will obviously actively promote the GSMA security guidelines. But one thing I would say, it's obviously really important for the customer to actually implement their own encryption and establish their own end-to-end security, obviously at the application layer. So that's one thing I would say. And also, during the onboarding process, we also ensure that the customer's device is actually OTA capable and actually enabled at the time of deployment.
So they can send those patches that Matthias was talking about.
Exactly. So this is obviously, it's inevitable at some point in the product's lifetime that it will have to have a firmware update.
That's quite normal, you would say.
It's very normal. So obviously by doing this, we can ensure that the device, and this is something else that we can test in the test lab as well, so within the facility.
So how it would receive it in a bad situation or a low signal situation?
We can look to see how it would actually handle a firmware over the air upgrades in a controlled environment. So this is something we can actually test with the customers before deploying.
Prove the concept before you send it out type thing. Yeah, wow.
And then I think we're also going to show a slide here. So This kind of just shows the IoT Connect ecosystem. So obviously on the right, there's a security section there where we talk about some of the products that we can actually, the things that we're often being asked for. So some of the customers, they will ask for things such as fraud detection, whether or not we can support APNs or VPNs.
Of course.
Whether or not we can restrict communication between terminals. As Matthias mentioned, we also support regular penetration testing of the solution. And we can obviously dive into these elements a little bit further on in the webinar, Peter. And then we also get asked if we can actually carry out customized routines.
Yes, yeah.
So this could be, for example, a customer would like to terminate a subscription. So it's actually a routine that we've actually implemented within the Service Operations Center where only personnel with security screening can actually carry out particular actions on behalf of the customer. Like I said, it could be a termination of a SIM card.
Yeah, so I know one of the customers that you're thinking of, and I know we've implemented these kind of routines for a few different customers. So you could have it that, you know, the customer notifies Telenor that they would like to terminate a SIM. We then verify that notification, and it's only our SOC who are able to do that, and they are all our support center, that is, and they are able to terminate those SIMs because they're security vetted and they have the extra access within the company.
Yep.
And obviously that prevents against like unauthorized denial of service attacks.
Exactly. And something else that we've also done recently is actually develop a platform called My Telenor IoT. And this is role-based user access. So only people with user credentials can actually access that platform. And then they can actually raise incidents or tickets directly with the Service Operations Center. So
and they're pre-verified.
You can verify the actual where that source of information has come from.
Yeah, so you know it's a legitimate contact before they raise the ticket.
Exactly.
And I suppose as well, having it as a custom routine is also quite beneficial from a security point of view because it's custom, it's bespoke to that customer. So in order to be fraudulent, you'd have to know the routine itself. So again, it's another layer. Very interesting, very interesting. And I guess, Matthias, speaking of routines and that kind of thing, another question that we get a lot is around frameworks and what frameworks we adhere to as a company. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there is a lot of different frameworks that you can use and work with. We have chosen to work with ISO. We are certified against 9001 for quality, as you may know, and ISO 27001 for security. And this is, in my opinion, the leading frameworks for this kind of area. But nevertheless, I mean, regardless of if you use this framework or another, it's important to have something you get a management system, you get this systematic approach to security when you adhere to a framework. And
I suppose as well, you know, if you are referring to a framework, you're not self-administering, you're not
No, exactly,
vetting.
because you have annual audits from independent bodies that certify your that you live up to the standard.
So you don't have any black spots, and I suppose as well, part of that means that as new threats come up, you know, this is the thing we see time and again in cybersecurity is that you know, you think you've solved every problem, and then something else comes up that no one has seen before, and so by having an external framework, you keep up to date with it.
You need to constantly evolve and be better and better.
And the certification obviously means that it's an unbiased, totally, you know, neutral approach to vet that you're up to standard. And I think the other one that we've mentioned before is the NIST, and another framework.
Exactly, and perhaps that's more on the American side of
Sure. Sure, but also another good approach because it's systematic in the same way.
Exactly.
Amazing. And I think as well, like, how would you say that we help our customers? Like, we talked obviously about the framework. Maybe we can talk a bit more about the specificities of what it is that we do. So, you know, what do we as Telenor do to help our customers minimize the threat? If I can come to you then, Matthias.
There is we have various actions that we do kind of undercover that the customer don't know about.
Sure.
But then also there is a lot of customer-facing features that maybe you can talk more about, Jay.
Absolutely, Matthias. So I think we come on to another slide here, and this is just showing our AI and machine learning tool. So this is something that's been very, very powerful. So this actually generates AI alarms and diagnostics. It's used by the Service Operations Center, once again, like I said, based in Karlskrona in the south of Sweden. But this actually detects deviations and anomalies, but not only at the network level, but also at the enterprise or customer level.
Oh, wow. So that's really interesting, I think, because, when you think about the footprint of a company like Telenor IoT, lots of end customers, lots of different use cases, high data, low data, different countries. But what you're saying is actually on our per enterprise of our customers. So, a customer in the UK has a specific footprint, a customer in India has a specific footprint, and the system will recognize this is what's normal for that use case and alert us if anything outside of that happens.
Exactly, and it's self-calibrating, self-learning over time as well.
Oh, wow. So as things change over time, it picks it up. Incredible. And I guess, if you were to expand on that a little bit more, what kind of, is it all action-based? Is it learning just on the data alone, or is it everything, country?
Yeah, so like as you mentioned, obviously it can look for things such as, if the data or traffic is being used in a certain country, which we're not used to, then obviously it will raise those alarms, and then obviously we can act upon those alarms. So that's typically what we would see.
Yeah. And I suppose also worth mentioning that our SOC themselves are based, as you said, in Karlskrona, but they are dedicated IoT to our IoT customers. It's not that they're, one of many problems that they might be troubleshooting that day from a consumer handset perspective or any other business unit that Telenor's involved in. It's specifically for IoT. I mean, I suppose, could you also come on maybe and talk a little bit more about, some of the other things, maybe like if we talk about the APNs and VPN side of things?
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. So I think we come on to another slide here. So obviously we will primarily focusing today on the IoT SIM security, so looking on the left-hand side of the slide. But this, I essentially want to show how we can actually help solve some of our customers' IoT security challenges. So as Matthias mentioned, obviously embedded SIM, so we support all of the different form factors. But with the MWF2 SIM, obviously it's soldered to the PCB, so obviously it makes it very difficult to remove.
Of course.
And these can be delivered as industrial or automotive grade.
So if they're in like a harsh environment.
Yep. And then we also, as I mentioned, we support private APNs. So these can be unique for an individual customer. No other customer's devices can use that APN. It's not available. And obviously this provides separation of concern for the customer.
Amazing.
From a VPN perspective, obviously it's providing a secure and private end-to-end connectivity from the Telenor IoT platform to the customer's data center.
Like a tunnel through the internet almost.
Exactly, via an IPsec tunnel.
Yeah. And I suppose maybe we can talk a little bit more about when we're talking about these things, the internet breakout side of things.
No, absolutely, Peter. Yep. So we have some customers who want to use either an IPsec VPN or a lease line, dedicated lease line, but sometimes they may need to break out the traffic locally. And this could be for latency reasons. So we actually have something called smart internet breakouts. So this is where they can actually set IP filters or IP rules based on that traffic.
Right. So you could actually have it that the stuff that you need to stay secure, stays in the encrypted VPN tunnel, but the stuff that doesn't necessarily need to be secure but can enhance the user experience by being more responsive, less latent, that can just go over the open internet.
Exactly. So the customer has the ability to actually divide the traffic where they send part of the traffic over the VPN and part of the traffic directly to the open internet.
Very clever. Very clever. And then I suppose another thing to maybe think about here is we've talked a lot about remote access. I mean, I don't know if you can maybe expound on a little bit of what that is, any customer examples that we have.
Yeah, so we've developed a tool called Remote Access, and this is actually a self-service secure inbound or provide self-service secure inbound access to your IoT device or IoT device groups. And what this actually allows customers to do is actually they can restrict the time of the day that certain users can actually access those devices,
right,
or the devices that they actually access.
Right. So if you had somebody working specific days of the week, specific hours, and they needed access during their working time, but then didn't need access outside of that, you could then verify that, and they couldn't get in essentially.
So yeah, we've got customers using these now for, it could be surveillance cameras,
of course,
obviously to get remote access, or it could be things such as EV charging stations where they need to perform diagnostics and troubleshooting.
So you could see the feed, but it's only specific devices that you can see the camera feed from. only specific times of day if you're a specific kind of user.
Yeah.
So it limits the access just to what's needed.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And then just to add to that as well, like I mentioned earlier, in terms of automation, so we actually support something called trigger management on the IoT platform. And this allows customers to actually set up triggers for things such as fraud prevention, cost prevention. So we can actually set up triggers based on the device's location, so we can actually be notified if it's in a particular country or a particular network.
Oh, so if you know that your devices should only be in Sweden, for example, and one pops up in the UK, you can send an alert.
Exactly, yeah. So that's one thing we can do. It could be an alert, a notification, which could be either a stomp if you're using the API or an email notification, or you can actually carry out an action. So that action
So
could
you
be to
could
actually
deactivate it,
them.
stop it communicating until you understood what it is.
Exactly.
Right, very interesting.
And then just to add to that as well, we actually have something called user administration. So through the self-service portal, customers can actually create their own users. Like I said, it's role-based user access, so they can actually decide whether to give the customer their sort of users, if they want to give them read access only, or obviously allow them to actually carry out various functions. And one of the things this actually allows customers to do is ensure GDPR compliance.
Yeah, of course. I mean, when I actually started at Telenor a number of years ago, the only way we could add users to the portal was that we would raise a request. We'd have to fill out the form, send it to our delivery team, and they would create it. And I remember thinking at the time that, and one of the hurdles that we faced was that, a customer might leave, and you don't know, because it's an end customer, you don't know if a member of staff has left, who's joined, if it should be an active email anymore. Yep. And you're just in a bit of a black hole. Yep. And so having the customer in charge of that means, as you say, it's much more secure. You don't have these old user accounts that they can still log into after the fact.
Exactly. So they can remove users as and when required. They can assign roles, all in obviously the customer's hands.
Brilliant. Thank you. And I think that's actually, to both of you, thank you so much for your time. I think that's a really, really great overview. And I think the key kind of takeaways for me are the fact that a framework is incredibly important, whichever framework you decide to go through. Obviously, we talked about NIST and we talked about ISO 27001, which is probably the more popular one in Europe, at least. I think having a framework definitely makes it easier to stay across all of the different threats and try and mitigate as much as we can. Obviously, Jay, you've talked a lot about the different products that we have. And of course, if there are any questions on those from the audience, then please do get in touch. I think the key thing for me is really, and it's kind of the way Telenor has tried to position ourselves, is that, you want a consultative partner. You want somebody who has a deep understanding of how security works, how devices work. And obviously, that's how we've always tried to position ourselves. And I think, for anyone watching, I think, whether you go with Telenor or not, it's important to have that partner, somebody who can advise, somebody who can help, because as you said, Matthias, like, what's not at stake? This stuff.
Exactly.
I think we can go to some questions now from the audience. I think there's a chat window. Please bear with me while I open my laptop. So one thing before we go into the questions, just for anyone watching, as a bit of a disclaimer, obviously it's a security webinar, and there might be some topics on here that we don't feel that we can answer because it's security related. So if there are any of those questions, then of course we will touch base with you afterwards. We can take that as an offline question. But so looking here, we've got one. You talked about testing devices. Can you make any recommendations around device testing? Jay, if I can come to you for that one.
Yep. So as I mentioned earlier, we've got this new test facility in Karlskrona. Like I said, it's got the live network feeds. We can test all the different access technologies. We actually provide this where a customer can actually attend in person. Or we can actually provide it as a service where a customer will actually send a device to us with obviously some simple instructions, and our lab experts will actually carry out the testing on behalf of the customer, or they can actually support this remotely. So there's a number of different ways of actually carrying out this testing, but like I said, it's really important to actually identify how the device will actually behave in different network scenarios.
And I personally can definitely recommend a visit down to Karlskrona, because it's a beautiful, beautiful part of the world. And there is actually a video as well on the Telenor LinkedIn page, which is about the Telenor test lab, which you can see. Was that what you were about to mention?
No, but I would just want to mention that it's important to know that we do not we don't certify customer devices.
Yeah,
but
good
we
note.
give them the possibility to test.
Yeah, so you can see if it works, but it's not a certification lab.
Exactly.
Yeah, good note.
And just to add to that as well, so we have predefined, obviously, use cases that we can perform in the test lab, but we also allow customers to actually define their own use cases or test
so
cases.
it can be what the customer wants the device to be tested under.
Yep.
Perfect. I've got another one here. What about network lock-in with MFF2 SIM? So I guess that, so MFF2, often known as eSIM, as a solderable SIM. The question here is, does that mean that you're locked in? You can't just pop out the piece of plastic and pop a new device in. Matthias, I don't know if you want to comment.
Well, yeah, that's true, but then you should use EUICC, which is the industry standard for avoiding lock-in. So you can have this insurance model where you
remotely switch to another network.
Exactly.
Yeah. And actually, there is the new standard, the new hybrid standard of IoT EUICC, which is, many people may have heard of SGP 32, which is currently undergoing publication. So we're expecting that to be something that comes up next year as a fully fledged thing. And it's kind of the IoT version of what we have in our Apple Watches and our iPhones when we choose our provider. But that's a really good note to make, that you can remotely swap and avoid those lock-in risks.
Yeah.
So we have one more here that I can see. So if a customer is looking for further information on security-related topics, are there any good resources to look for? Jay, if I can maybe come to you first, and then Matthias.
Yeah, so obviously we mentioned earlier the GSMA security guidelines, so I'd certainly say that's a good place to start. But Matthias, I know you obviously are a lot more familiar with this topic.
Yeah, but I agree. That's a good starting point, and also our website, iot.telenor.com.
Yes.
There is a lot of documents to be downloaded.
Perfect.
Including white papers.
Yeah.
And of course, anyone can always contact us, get in touch and ask any questions offline. And I think that's all of the questions we have here. So thank you all for your time. Thank you, Matthias. Thank you, Jay, for your time. Thank you for joining. And we will see you all very, very soon.